reverse this course. Keeping the payroll tax cut in place as we figure out a way to extend it for the year reduces uncertainty among employers and the families in my district, the workers in my district, and I ask that we reconsider what we're doing today. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Have a wonderful day.
Gentleman's time has expired. Members are reminded to address their remarks to the chair, not to other members of the body. The chair will now recognize the gentleman from Michigan, Mr. Camp.
Mr. Speaker, I yield 2 minutes to a distinguished member of the Ways and Means Committee, the gentlewoman from Kansas, Ms. Jenkins.
Gentleman from Kansas is recognized for 2 minutes.
And I thank the gentleman for yielding. Mr. Speaker, folks are mad out there. They're mad because what Congress is doing or not doing in many cases makes absolutely no sense. As a CPA, I'll tell you that handling tax policy on a month-to-month basis isn't just irresponsible, it's downright crazy. According to the nonpartisan National Payroll Reporting Consortium, the cost of complying with the 2-month extension proposed by the Senate may actually harm many small businesses. In fact, implementing the cuts on this short timeline may not even be possible. In addition to being a CPA, I'm also a mom, and I do just about anything to be working out of our Topeka office this time of year so that I could spend the evening with my kids. But agreeing to a tax policy that is so short-lived that it costs not just our government, but also our small businesses big bucks is not one of them. The American people are exhausted. They're sick and tired of Congress kicking the can down the road on hard decisions. So I ask our leaders in the Senate, are your vacation plans more important than good policy? Why will it be easier to negotiate a deal in February than it is today? Come back. We still have time. Work with us to do the job we were elected to do. Let's make the hard decisions today. Let's extend the payroll tax cut for the entire year, and let's not do it on the backs of a generation more focused on Santa right now than they are on tax policy. I yield back.
Gentlelady yields back. The gentleman from Michigan, Mr. Levin, is recognized.
I yield 3 minutes to the gentleman from Maryland, Mr. Van Hollen, who's ranking on the Budget Committee.
Gentleman from Maryland is recognized for 3 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I thank the gentleman from Michigan. The American people should understand very clearly what's going on here right now, and that is that the Republican majority in this House of Representatives is refusing to allow a vote in this House on the Senate bipartisan compromise. They are refusing to even allow a vote on a bill that received 89 of 100 votes in the Senate, including 85% of the Senate Republicans. What are they so afraid of? It's very clear that the Republican leadership is afraid that that same bipartisanship that took place in the Senate will take place right here in the House, because they don't want a bipartisan bill. Otherwise, we'd have a vote on it. What we are witnessing today, Mr. Speaker, is the triumph of Tea Party extremism over the good of the country. The sad part is we probably shouldn't be surprised, because it was just a few months ago that the Republican leadership was opposed to extending the payroll tax cut at all. They originally said that raising taxes on 160 million Americans would be okay, no problem. I have a long list of statements from Republican House leaders to that effect. Then 2 things happened. A whole lot of economists told us what was common sense, that in fact if you raise taxes on 160 million Americans, it will hurt the economy. And it also began to sound a little strange for our Republican colleagues to be zealously protecting tax breaks for special interests and for millionaires while allowing tax increases on 160 million Americans. So they changed their story. Then it was we couldn't do this because it was going to hurt the Social Security Trust Fund, that coming from the party that wanted to privatize Social Security. And then the Social Security actuary told us in the country that it wouldn't take 1 cent from the Social Security Trust Fund. So now we have a whole different story today. Now the same folks who were opposed to any continuation of the payroll tax cut say they oppose the bipartisan Senate bill because it was only for 2 months. Now they are preventing a vote on that bill. The consequence is going to be very clear. January 1st, 160 million Americans are going to see their payroll taxes increased. At the end of the day, the Republican majority here in the House is going to go home. They're going to go home. But you know what will remain here? The Senate bipartisan bill, because we will never have voted on it. So at any time in the next several weeks, we can all come right back here and in a matter of 5 minutes send that bill to the President's desk, which he said he will sign, and make sure that we avoid a payroll tax increase on 160 million Americans. Make sure that folks who are unemployed through no fault of their own get unemployment compensation. Make sure that doctors will continue to be paid when they treat Medicare patients so they can serve those patients. It will be sitting right here for 3 weeks. Why? Because the Republican majority won't let us vote on it. I'd be happy to yield 30 seconds to my friend, the chairman of the Ways and Means Committee, to tell us why you refuse to allow a vote on the Senate bipartisan bill.
Gentleman's time has expired. Gentleman from Michigan, Mr. Camp, is recognized.
I would just say that if Minority Leader Pelosi and Senator Reid appoint conferees, there's no reason for taxes to go up. And with that, I would yield 2 minutes to the distinguished member of the
Gentleman
Ways
from
and Means
Michigan controls the time. The gentleman from
Mr.
Maryland is out of
Speaker.
order. The gentleman from Maryland shall suspend.
I can see why the gentleman's a little bit defensive
Gentleman from
about
Michigan
that,
is
but
recognized.
I would yield 2 minutes to the distinguished member of the Ways and Means Committee, the gentlewoman from Tennessee, Ms. Black.
Gentleman from Tennessee is recognized for 2 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Fixing something for 2 months is not fixing something. It's a Band-Aid, and it's bad policy. I've been a nurse for over 40 years, and I'm going to use a medical analogy to illustrate this point. If someone were to come into the emergency room where I'm working with an issue, a medical issue, and I said to them, I'll give you a choice. We can either fix your problem for 2 months, or we can fix your problem for a year. I have no doubt that the patient would choose certainty of 1 year over 2 months. For the past 10 months, I have been visiting individuals and businesses in my district, and what I continually hear from them is that uncertainty is hurting them and it's hurting our economy. Now, the House sent a bill to the Senate that contains some certainty, and we get back a 2-month Band-Aid. In this bill, we had certainty for businesses, certainty for doctors, certainty for individual taxpayers, and certainty for our seniors. There is a need for a 2-year extension on the Medicare reimbursement for our doctors to ensure that seniors receive access to care. There is a need for a 1-year payroll holiday for individuals and businesses. As has already been said, the National Payroll Reporting Consortium, which is a nonpartisan group, have expressed concerns to members of Congress that the 2-month payroll tax holiday, passed by the Senate and supported by the President, cannot be implemented properly. We also need a 2-year extension or a fix for our unemployment benefits to give certainty to businesses and also to individuals. Mr. Speaker, I am frustrated that the Senate kicked the can down the road one more time for only 2 months after we sent them a bill that was not only bipartisan, yes, a bipartisan bill passed by this House, but also had good job policies. I came back to D.C. yesterday to do something better, a package that creates certainty for a 2-month patch. Thank you.
Gentleman from Michigan, Mr. Levin, is recognized.
I now yield 2 minutes to a very distinguished member, the gentlelady from Illinois, Jan Schakowsky.
Gentlelady from Illinois is recognized for 2 minutes.
I thank the gentleman for yielding. Don't blame Congress for not working together. Blame the House Republicans who can't even work with each other. The one and only reason this House of Representatives is not voting for the bipartisan Senate bill to provide relief to middle-class taxpayers, seniors, and disabled people on Medicare and jobless Americans is because it would pass. That's right. The Republican scam was to bring up the bill supported by 90% of the Senate and then kill it. But on the way to this slaughter, a funny thing happened. Sensible Republicans basically said, you want me to vote to abandon millions of middle-class Americans without the help they need this holiday season? No way. So the sanctimonious rhetoric you hear today from the Republicans is nothing but talk, baby talk, If they don't get their way exactly, then they won't play. What they're saying to millions of Americans, saying Happy Hanukkah to middle-class Americans who are lighting the first candle tonight and won't get their $1,000 tax break. Happy New Year to our seniors and people with disabilities who may lose their doctor. Merry Christmas to the jobless Americans, desperate for work, looking for work, who barely survive on their unemployment checks. The House Republicans are the Grinches who stole your Christmas. And I yield back.
The gentlelady yields back. The gentleman from Michigan, Mr. Camp, is recognized.
I yield 2 minutes to a distinguished member of the Ways and Means Committee, the gentleman from New York, Mr. Reed.
Gentleman from New York, recognized for 2 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. To my colleagues on the other side of the aisle, it's not a $1,000 payroll tax reduction, just as was quoted by my colleague who just spoke. The Senate bill is 2 months. It's $160. So let's be clear and honest with the American people. What we're talking about here in the House of Representatives on our side of the aisle today is that we want to do our work. Yes, we want to be with our families for Christmas, and we want to be home ringing in the new year with our family and friends. But you know what? The American people deserve better. We are willing to stay here and do the work, not do Band-Aid type of policy. Tax policy on a 2-month basis? Are you kidding me? That is ridiculous. We need long-term solutions to our problems in America. We need to put the political bickering aside. 2 months is not a solution. It's dodging responsibility in the Senate. And so where I'm at today is I support the underlying bill that we stand and rise to support today. And it is a vote. We will have a vote to reject the Senate's position with its amendments and its Band-Aid policy, and we will send a clear message to the American people that we in the House of Representatives are about finding solutions long-term, 1-2 years at a minimum. And we're willing to do the work, and I call on the Senate to come back to D.C. and finish the job. Hard-working taxpayers of America deserve no less than for us to honor our oath and our responsibility to govern through solutions, not political gains. With that, I yield the balance of my time.
The gentleman yields back. The gentleman from Michigan, Mr. Levin, is recognized.
Could you verify how much time each side has?
The gentleman from Michigan, Mr. Levin, has 7.5 minutes. The gentleman from Michigan, Mr. Camp, has 5 minutes.
I now yield 2.5 minutes to the very distinguished colleague from Florida, Ms. Wasserman Schultz.
The gentlelady from Florida is recognized for 2.5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I rise today in firm opposition to this motion to go to conference without a vote on the Senate bill to extend the payroll tax cut and unemployment benefits. It is deeply disappointing and troubling that we'll be denied the opportunity to vote on the Senate's overwhelmingly bipartisan compromise that would bring relief to millions of America's working families. Now, our Republican colleagues have said, pass the one-year bill that passed the House last week. Well, talk to your Republican colleagues in the Senate. 4 times the Senate Democrats tried to bring up your bill, and 4 times a Senate Republican objected. Facts are hard. If we do not pass this bill, 160 million Americans will face a $1,000 tax increase as we go into the new year. If we do not act in my home state, 9 million Floridians will see this tax increase next year. If we do not act, 2.2 million unemployed Americans will lose their unemployment benefits. And if we do not act, 48 million seniors will face the specter of having to find new doctors due to cuts to Medicare reimbursement rates. Like many of my colleagues, I've received countless constituent calls, letters, and emails, many of them very personal and emotional. Just this morning, I was especially moved by a note from a single mom, Christine, with a 3-year-old daughter from my congressional district. She wrote, I am pleading my case to you out of desperation to extend unemployment insurance. These benefits help her provide food and necessities for her daughter. Too many of my colleagues like to paint unemployment beneficiaries with one insensitive and cruel brush. This young woman is not someone sitting around just collecting government checks. She was laid off from her job this fall and has only been on unemployment for a couple of months while she looks for another job. My constituent's story, while personal and moving, is unfortunately not a unique one. My Republican colleagues who callously ignore the needs of middle-class Americans by refusing to vote on the payroll tax extension and unemployment benefits are sending the message to millions of working families that despite their efforts to look for and find work in this delicate economy, they simply don't care. The House Republican leadership needs to allow a straight up or down vote on the Senate bill that passed 89 to 10 with strong bipartisan support. Clearly, they're afraid it might pass. I urge you to listen to the plight of constituents like Christine, who said, "I'm asking that they give people more time to find work by pushing these dates back further. I'm having a very hard time trying to find work that will accommodate my living expenses for myself and my 3-year-old daughter." Christine has only been on unemployment since September. She needs our help. Millions of Americans need our help. Pass this bill and stop playing politics with people's lives. Thank you. I yield back the balance of my time.
The gentleman from Michigan, Mr. Camp, is recognized.
I yield a minute and a half to the distinguished gentleman from Louisiana, Mr. Scalise.
The gentleman from Louisiana is recognized for a minute and a half.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I thank the gentleman from Michigan for yielding. What we're talking about here today, Mr. Speaker, is the difference between passing a tax policy that would only last 2 months or passing a tax policy that lasts the entire year. You know, during these next week and a half, while families are sitting at home doing their budget for next year, they're going to be making their budget for the entire year of 2012, not for just 2 months. And yet what the Senate sent over is a plan that would only kick the can down the road, and we'd be right back here again having this same debate in 2 months. And people are sick and tired of this kind of absurd action from Congress. You know, if you look at early civics courses, anybody that takes their first civics course knows that when there's a difference between the House and the Senate, as there is here, then the two sides appoint conferees and they get together and they work out those differences. That's what the legislative process is about, and clearly we have a difference. We think the policy should be for an entire year, as even the President has said, and the Senate sent us over a 2-month patch that doesn't even fix the problem. In fact, outside groups like National Federation of Independent Businesses said this would hurt small businesses. And yet what do we get from the other side? Minority Leader Pelosi, Mr. Speaker, said she will not appoint any House Democrats to participate in the negotiations. She just said this last night. So in the spirit of Christmas, you've got the Minority Leader saying she's just going to take her toys and go home. That's not the responsible thing to do. Let's stay here. Let's get the policy right. Let's do our work. And let's have the Senate do their work, too, for the American people. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I yield back.
The gentleman yields back. The gentleman from Michigan, Mr. Levin, is recognized.
I now yield 1 minute to the distinguished gentleman from Georgia, Mr. Scott, David Scott.
Gentleman from Georgia is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you very much, and I appreciate the opportunity to come down and to say a few words on this. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm so glad that the people of this country are tuning into what's happening on the floor of this House of Representatives. What we are seeing is a great dysfunction in the Republican Party and the House of Representatives. Here's the situation. The American people are hurting. 160 million American people do not need their taxes to go up. There are 2.2 million American people who are without unemployment benefits, who will have those unemployment benefits not extended. And they're seniors, 48 million of them, who will not be able to go and visit their doctors. America's hurting, and what do the Republican Party and the House of Representatives want to do? They want to hurt them some more by not even allowing a vote on a compromise bill that was passed by the Senate with 89 votes, 39 of them members of the House of Representatives, members of the Senate Republican Party. Ladies and gentlemen, what's at stake here is a failure to compromise. That is the key. When Hamilton and Jefferson failed to compromise, it was John Adams that brought them together. Where would this country be if that had not happened? Ladies and gentlemen of America, wake up and realize that this is not a party just of Tea Party people or Republicans or Democrats. It's a party of all of us.
Regular order.
The gentleman from Georgia shall suspend. Gentleman from Georgia is recognized for 1 minute. Gentleman from Georgia's time's expired. Regular order will be had on the House floor. Gentleman from Michigan, Mr. Camp, is recognized.
I yield a minute to the distinguished gentleman from Georgia, Mr. Kingston.
Gentleman from Georgia is recognized for 1 minute.
I thank the gentleman. The President of the United States has said it would be inexcusable not to extend the payroll tax cut for 1 year. Ms. Pelosi, Mr. Hoyer have said the same thing, as have dozens of other leading Democrats. I agree with them, and so does a bipartisan majority of the House who last week voted to extend the tax cut for 1 year. Now, why do we support it for 1 year? Because 2 months only gives uncertainty to this fragile economy. Uncertainty. Families can't plan, businesses can't plan, and jobs can't be created. So why do the Democrats want the 2 months? Sadly, because like their Democrat colleagues in the Senate, they want to go home. But you know what? There's a 200-year-old mechanism for ironing out Senate and House agreements. It's called a conference committee. Now, your leader has decided not to appoint people to this conference committee. You want to compromise? That's what this vote is all about. We want to compromise. We know we can't get everything we want, but unlike the Senate, we're not saying it's our way or the highway. We're saying compromise. Vote yes on this vote, and let's compromise and let's get this done.
Gentleman's time has expired. Gentleman from Michigan, Mr. Levin, is recognized.
I now yield 1 minute to the gentleman from Massachusetts, Mr. Markey.
Gentleman from Massachusetts, recognized for 1 minute.
Mr. Speaker, tax cuts delayed are tax cuts denied. Last year, just before the holidays, the House Republicans extended the Bush tax cuts for millionaires and billionaires, no strings attached. And this year, Republicans won't even allow a vote to extend middle-class tax cuts. Republicans want to procrastinate. Democrats want to legislate. When it comes to millionaires, the Republicans are Santa Claus. For the middle class, they're the Grinch. This isn't Mission Impossible, Mr. Speaker. We don't need Tom Cruise to save seniors, the middle class, and the unemployed. We just need to pass the Senate compromise right now. By not allowing an up or down vote on this bipartisan compromise, the Republicans are raising the curtain on their real priorities, millionaires and billionaires. Americans don't need any more meetings. They don't need any more debate. They just need us to make sure their taxes do not go up on New Year's Day. Today, we can protect the middle class, the seniors, and the unemployed by passing this bipartisan compromise right now. Do it now.
Gentleman's time's expired. Gentleman from Michigan, Mr. Camps, recognized.
I yield 1 minute to the distinguished chairman of the Select Revenue Committee, the gentleman from Ohio, Mr. Teaberry.
Gentleman from Ohio is recognized for 1 minute.
Mr. Speaker, this debate is in many ways surreal. Surreal. I learned in Civics 101 that the House is a co-equal branch to the Senate. Members of the other side say, well, this is a compromise. It's a compromise in the Senate, not the House. The House has spoken. The Senate says, my way or the highway. Now, I understand that that's how it's kind of become around here, and I know there are friends on the other side of the aisle who are upset with the Senate when they've done it on other bills when they were in the majority. This is enough. The American people deserve better. We need to get back to regular order. We need to compromise between the House-passed bill and the Senate-passed bill. That's the way the Founding Fathers wanted it. Compromise between the House, the Senate, not between the Senate and the Senate. For 2 months, for the American people. That's outrageous. They deserve a year, a full year to have a payroll tax holiday, not 2 months. Come on, ladies and gentlemen. Let's send the Senate a message. Come back to Washington. Do your work. Give the American people a year, not 2 months. I yield back.
Gentleman's time's expired. The gentleman from Michigan, Mr. Levin, is recognized.
How much time is there left, please?
Gentleman from Michigan, Mr. Levin, has 3 minutes. The gentleman from Michigan, Mr. Camp, has 1.5 minutes. Gentleman from Michigan, Mr. Levin.
Mr. Camp, are you going to close?
Further speakers.
I yield myself the balance of our time.
Gentleman's recognized.
You know, I remember when I was doing arguments before a court and a judge would ask me a very salient question that would get to the heart of the matter. And that's where we are today. There's this question to the Republican majority. If you're so sure of your arguments, why not allow a vote on the Senate bill? Otherwise, everything you've said is a smokescreen. it's because you're afraid you'd lose it. Or you don't want some people voting no on the record. That's really what this is about. And there's a second question. If you believe in bipartisanship, why not allow a vote on a bipartisan bill in the Senate? I quoted 3 senators, and 3 more now have spoken out. Senators Snowe, Wicker, and Grassley. Senator Grassley says, if it doesn't pass the House today, there's a chance the payroll tax holiday will be lost. And Senator Wicker says, I'm surprised the House isn't willing to take a 2-month time out to do something more lasting. So I think the answer is, again, your talk about bipartisanship is totally shallow. The previous speaker said, the Senate said, it's my way or the highway. No, that isn't accurate. The Speaker of the House said to the Senate, get on the road and pass a bill, and never said, don't do it. He said, do it. No, the problem is that many people in the House never wanted to extend the payroll tax in the first place. And you sent over a bill that deleted 40 weeks of unemployment insurance for the millions who are looking for work and can't find a job. So today we have no choice but to vote no and insist that this obligation be met in this House of Representatives. Vote, vote, vote on the bill that the Senate passed. And your denial of allowing us a vote is a denial to the people of this country who are uninsured as of December 1st for unemployment, who need Medicare cuts, care, and also those who need the continuation of the payroll tax cut. That's what all of this is about, and anything else is a pure smokescreen that all the American people will see through.
Gentleman's time's expired. The gentleman from Michigan, Mr. Camp's recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I yield myself the balance of my time.
Gentleman's recognized.
What we're voting on today is to disagree with what the Senate did to our bill. We're voting to disagree to the Senate amendments. Once that's adopted, the House message on this bill goes back to the Senate, and the Senate then is the only body in possession of the bill, and we cannot move forward to resolve the differences between the House and the Senate until Leader Reid and Representative Pelosi appoint conferees. So we're voting to disagree with the Senate. And let me just say, 2 months isn't long enough. You've heard a lot of people talk today in this debate. It's embarrassing that we're doing tax policy for 2 months. But it's not just House Republicans who think we need a longer-term extension. It's supporters, including many of our nation's Democratic governors. I received a letter that I asked unanimous consent to put into the record that actually went to our leaders last week from 16 of the nation's governors, Democratic governors, after we approved 3630. They called for a swift passage of a 1-year extension, not 2 months, 1 year. That's what the House bill does, and what's more, that's what the Senate bill specifically rejects. I urge that we vote to disagree with the Senate amendments, and let's get on to a conference. Let's resolve this year so we can make certainty in our code, certainty for all of those people who are out of work, and certainty for those seniors who need to see a physician for more than 2 months, but for 2 years. I yield back.
All time for debate has expired. Pursuant to House Resolution 502, the previous question is ordered. The question is on the motion by the gentleman from Michigan, Mr. Camp. All those in favor say aye. Those opposed, no. The ayes have it. The motion is agreed to. Without objection, the motion to reconsider is laid upon the table.
I asked what?
Gentleman from Michigan, Mr. Levin.
I asked for a recorded vote.
Mr. Speaker, I request a recorded vote.
The gentleman's asked for the yeas and nays.
Yeas and nays.
The yeas and nays are requested. Those favoring a vote by the yeas and nays will rise. A sufficient number having risen, the yeas and nays are ordered. Members will record their votes by electronic device. This will be a 15-minute vote.
Debate over the tax cut extension continues into the afternoon today. We're not sure how long today's session will be, but members are holding one vote right now on a motion to disagree with the Senate-approved payroll tax cut bill and to request a conference with the Senate to negotiate the differences between the House and Senate bills. These two items contained in this one vote. It is 15 minutes. Assuming that's approved, we next are expecting each side to lay out exactly what they want. Members will debate a Democrat motion to instruct conferees, which emphasizes what the Democrats want in the tax bill, followed by debate reaffirming the Republicans' position on their original tax cut bill. Also, a number of suspension bills that the House debated yesterday still needing votes, and we are not yet clear when those will come up. So right now, one vote in the House. In a moment, we will open the phone lines to get your reaction to the tax cut debate. The numbers are 202-585-3885 for Republicans. Democrats, your number to call, 202-585-3886. And for independents, it's 202-585-3887. Before we get to your calls, joining us to get a clearer picture of all this is Kate Hunter, congressional reporter with Bloomberg Government. Thanks for joining us, Kate.
Thanks for having me.
Why have House Republican leaders set up a vote to reject the Senate-passed payroll tax cut bill instead of allowing a simple clean up or down vote on it?
Well, House Republican leaders have been saying that their preference is to go to conference and work out some kind of year-long extension with the Senate rather than to just pass a 2-month extension, which they say doesn't provide the kind of certainty necessary to job creators and to, provide an economic stimulus. So they would prefer to work out, they're now saying they would prefer to work out some kind of year-long deal. The problem is the Senate has declared that they're done voting for the year, and obviously time is running short, and they haven't yet been able to reach a deal on a year-long extension.
Rank and file Republicans met with their leaders last evening for over 2 hours. What was their message to leadership?
Well, from what I determined after the conference, a lot of that discussion had to do with kind of the plans for the rest of the year. Obviously, the holidays are approaching. Members are anxious to get home to their districts and their families. So I think a lot of the discussion had to do with kind of the strategy for I'll put it this way, dispensing with the Senate bill, whether, as you said, to have a straight up or down vote on it, or whether to vote instead, as they've decided to do, essentially to sort of reject the Senate amendment and go to conference. And then there was also some discussion, from what I understand, talking to members leaving the meeting about whether members would be required to stick around after today or whether they would be given the green light to go home.
What are House Republican leaders hoping to accomplish with the sense of the House resolution that they'll also vote on today?
Well, the sense of the House resolution kind of functions as like a motion to instruct conferees. It basically is sort of insisting on or, reiterating House Republican support for the measure that they passed on December 13th, which was a year-long extension that included a number of offsets, such as a pay freeze for federal employees that a lot of Democrats found objectionable and basically became a non-starter in the Senate.
Do we know what will happen after the House wraps up work today?
Well, I think everyone's kind of waiting with bated breath, myself included, to find out. I just spoke with Majority Leader Cantor's office, and they handle the schedule, and I spoke with them just right before this interview, and they said that they're in the process of making a decision both about whether the House will be in session tomorrow and also about whether members will again be given the green light to leave town. There was some question about whether the conferees, because what the House is going to do after it, presuming that, it does in fact move to go to conference, which seems like the expected outcome, the House is going to appoint its conferees, most likely. The Senate, again, has left town, so they're probably not going to follow suit, but the question is whether all members will be allowed to leave, whether the conferees only will be required to stick around, whether everyone's going to stick around, whether there'll be more votes. It's all kind of up in the air at the moment.
So with the Senate out of town, what is Majority Leader Reid saying about the House's request for a conference?
Well, Majority Leader Reid has said basically that, the Senate has passed its 2-month extension. He's pointed out that, that 2-month deal received very broad support in the Senate, 89 senators supporting it, and he's basically called on the House to, approve that extension as a way of whether or not, he's basically said that whether or not there's a formal conference, that what makes the most sense is to, pass a 2-month extension now to make sure that unemployment benefits, physician payment rates don't change, unemployment benefits don't expire, and that the payroll tax cut doesn't expire come January 1st, and then said, that there's no reason why informal negotiations can't go on between now and the time the 2-month extension would run out in order to get a broader deal on a year-long extension. So his strategy has been to say, why don't we do this 2-month deal, and then that will buy us a little bit of time to work out a broader deal. House Republicans haven't been willing to go along with that plan.
So what's your prediction for how all this gets resolved? Will taxes go up for working taxpayers the first of the year?
Well, if there is a path forward to avoid that happening, it's certainly not clear at the moment. Anything can happen, especially in the late days of the year. But it certainly seems like there's not a clear path towards preventing the payroll tax cut from expiring come January 1st. I guess the question then becomes when Congress comes back in January, if they're able or willing to reach some kind of a resolution that would perhaps do something retroactively or at least pick up, reenact the payroll cut once it's expired. And that obviously still remains up in the air.
And finally, how's this affecting your holiday?
Well, it's up in the air like everyone else's at the moment.
Kate Hunter is with Bloomberg Government. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you so much.
The vote in the House on a motion to disagree with the Senate-approved payroll tax bill and requesting a conference with the Senate to come up with a House-Senate compromise. And now we're opening the phone lines to take your calls on the tax cut extension. Again, Republicans 202-585-3885. Democrats, your number to call 202-585-3886. And for independents, your number 202-585-3887. And we do welcome those of you listening on C-SPAN radio and online. Our first call is Danny in Falls Church, Virginia, on the Republicans line. Thanks for calling us, Danny.
Yes, thank you very much for the opportunity to comment. It seems like that the Senate is very self-centered, and so are the Democrats in the House of Representatives for insisting that the House of Representatives must go along with the Senate version of the bill and pass their bill. That doesn't sound like a compromise. It sounds like the Senate trying to bully the House into doing what it wants it to do, simply because the Congress has been off of session so many days this year and not doing the American people's business. And here it gets down to the end of the year and the American people's business is not done again. And so it's a pox on both of their houses, both the Democrats in the Senate and the Republicans and the Democrats in the House of Representatives. What the American people should do, which would be in the greatest spirit of the season right now, is to pick up the telephone and call their congressman or senator's office at the U.S. Capitol at 202-224-3121 and insist that the Senate and the House work through the holidays. While the American people are celebrating the holidays, the people that they've sent to Washington to do their work this year have not done it. So the American people should insist and demand that the House and the Senate stay in session. And the Republicans in the House should also pass any version of this bill that they can every day between now and the end of the year and send it over to the Senate, one bill after the other, and force the Senate to come back into session and do the American people's work.
How much do you think politics plays in all of this?
I think politics plays a tremendous amount in it. The one thing that's very interesting about this is the reason that the Democrats are wanting to go along with this Senate version now is they want to have this debate again in early 2012, just as the presidential season is heating up. And the Republicans are playing politics with it because they want to deny the Democrats the right to have that debate again. So it's a pox on both of their houses. And what this is really about, it's about the presidential campaign is what it's about. And the Democrats know that their economic policies under Barack Obama have been a complete disaster for the past 3 years. And they want to have one little bone now to throw out to the American public before they go home for the Christmas time to say, hey, look what we did for you. Well, you know what? Those of us who are members of the public out here, we're smarter than that. And we intend to hold both houses of Congress accountable for their inactivity. And the American public should insist by calling their representatives now that Congress come back and stay in session through January and do the American people's work.
All right, Danny, thanks for your call. Next to, sorry to cut you off there, next to Brad in Fayetteville, North Carolina. Brad's calling on the Democrats line.
Hi, good afternoon, sir. Thank you very much for the time. And I actually really want to reiterate most of Danny's points. I do not understand why my party doesn't want to dance. I don't understand why they are ignoring this opportunity to have the conference with the Senate. And like Danny pointed out, you know, the Senate seems to be the bully in this case. And of course, the Senate proposed bill, of course, the Senate is controlled by the Democrats and the House, of course, the Republicans. And as you mentioned with him, is the politics plays a lot in it. And of course, politics by definition is the science of government. And it seems as if all these scientists just want to go home.
Who's your congressman in Fayetteville?
Mike McIntyre.
Have you tried contacting him?
I actually sent him an email late last night. I've been you know, greatly concerned about this particular issue because I am of a middle class or very impoverished family. Many of my family members are, and I was up till 2:30, 3 o'clock perhaps, you know, emailing him.
Any reaction yet?
Yeah, I specifically requested some kind of response from his office and have not yet received a thing.
Thanks, Brad. Next, Independence line, Kim in Canton, Ohio.
Hi, how are we doing today?
Good, how are you?
I think that the Democrats in the Senate or in the House are playing a game because the House has already passed a bill and sent it to the Senate that would extend all of this stuff for a year, plus incorporate the pipeline, which would actually make jobs. The cut that they're talking about is not a payroll cut, it's a Social Security cut. And Social Security is already broke. As an independent, I have talked to people, both sides of the line, that work, and they don't even notice this tax cut. Most of them didn't know what I was talking about. They didn't notice any difference whatsoever in their paychecks. So it's a farce. The whole thing's a farce. But the Senate was sent a bill that would pass it for a year, and they did nothing with it except send back one that was for 2 months. So who's playing games? All of them.
Well, as Kim mentioned, this is not just over the tax cut extension. The bill also includes extending unemployment benefits, construction of the Keystone XL pipeline from Canada to Texas, and the Medicare doc fix. Next let's see, the Republicans line. It's Armand in Jonesboro, Georgia. Thanks for joining us.
Hi, thanks for having me on. The reason I'm calling is I just want y'all to understand that there's a lot of people like myself. You know, I'm one of 6 people in my house, and 1 out of 6 people, even sitting here watching this, that even understands what's going on in this economy right now. I'm on unemployment, and the other people in my house are on disability. And I would just assume as to lose my unemployment today as to see the Republicans give in to the Democrats over this smoke screen, which is, to me, I feel like they're just trying to keep them doing anything with this pipeline that's been has been talked about this morning. Everybody that I've heard on this line has talked about they feel the same way I do about the Democrats trying to build a smoke screen over this whole pipeline deal. I mean, really, if they pass the bill that had went to the Senate to start with, we wouldn't even be having this conversation. And I believe most of the American people would be happy with a one-year extension.
Coronado, California. Wes is calling on the Democrats line.
Yes. My problem is with the Keystone pipeline, we subsidized these oil companies big tax dollars. Now they want the taxpayers to pay for a pipeline? Is that kind of crazy? I mean, they absorb all these profits, and they don't have enough from their profits to build a pipeline? Why are the Republicans so hard-headed about this? They want to let the taxpayers pay for another pipeline? I agree with the whole package except for that Keystone oil thing, and we don't know what it's going to do to the environment. We need cars that get 40 and 60 miles a gallon, and we don't need any more oil companies involved in government. Thank you.
Antonio, Providence, Rhode Island, on the Independence line.
Yes, good afternoon. I was listening to that last gentleman. He should smarten up a little bit. I'm a Korean vet. Number one, why should we be paying other countries for fuel, and then they turn around and throw it back as in the bombs and everything else they use? Number one, this country should smarten up because we lost a lot of guys between Korea and what we got going on today. Number one, I watch the Senate quite often. That's the biggest joke I've ever seen. If they're not on quorum, they're waiting for somebody to talk. They go there for 6 hours, and 4 hours are wasted. This thing they should not pass this thing. Stop it cold. And let the people get mad enough to start throwing these people out of Washington. Because all they do over there is take money off every organization they get. I got two people in my state. They did the money that you're not supposed to do as an independent, but they can do it because they have a law that they can do in trading that way. We can't. It's about time this country starts smartening up and start changing these people in Washington. You could put 4 14-year-olds in there and do a better job than they do. They're terrible. Thank you very much and have a good holiday.
Of course, the Senate is not in session. When they do return, you can see live coverage on our companion network, C-SPAN 2. Up next, a call from Gene in Rogersville, Tennessee.
Yeah, I wanted to make a couple of comments. I hear the Republicans are calling in and telling about the Democrats, how they didn't do this on this bill that the House is on now. The Senate Democrats brought this bill up 4 times, and it was objected by the Republican senators. So they can't say this bill was not tried to be brought up in the Senate by the Democrats, because that is not true. It was 4 times. And I watched every time that the Senate Republicans objected to even allow the bill to come to the floor. And this bill is so bad that the Republicans in the Senate said it was so bad they couldn't even support it. Not because it's going back to conference, it was so bad. Thank you very much.
And that was Gene on the Democrats line. To the Republican line now, David in Ayuka, Missouri. There we go.
Actually, it's Ayuka, Mississippi.
Oh, sorry about that.
And basically, I just think it's unfair that the Senate is just absolutely even just refusing to, do the conference and really get this all worked out. They're trying to get the House to actually putting them in an unwinnable position. It's either they pass it and they don't win because it's only for 2 months, or they don't pass it and then they get ridiculed for not passing it. And I don't think it's fair at all. I think the Senate needs to come back to order and get together and get this all ironed out. The House had big support for the original bill where it was for a year. Why the Senate went for 2 months, I don't know. And what really gets me is how the Democrats can't even admit when they're wrong, because there are entities out there that have looked this thing over and have said that a 2-month plan is not going to work. It's not workable. It's going to hurt businesses. And yet the Democrats are still insisting that they're trying to do the right thing.
Thanks for your call. In an article in The Hill today by Alicia Cohn, Senator Schumer from New York predicted the GOP will fold and said Democrats should wait out the House Republicans over the payroll tax cut extension. Quote, in a few days they will fold unless someone falls for these subterfuges which get them off the hook without producing a middle-class tax cut. He said that on MSNBC today. Leroy is in let's see, Mankato, Minnesota. And he's on the Independence line.
Hi. You know, I think they should have just had a clean vote on the payroll tax extension, tax cut. I don't understand why the Keystone Pipeline was brought in. If they're so concerned about the oil issue, it should have been a separate vote. And the callers keep talking about this domestic oil. That oil is sold on the world market, whether it comes from Canada or wherever. And as far as the Democrats, they're caving, and the Republicans, I don't know where's Grover Norquist when it comes to holding Republicans accountable for raising taxes on middle class and poor people. You know, the minute it was a threat for the millionaires, the 1%, there were people's heads rolling, even talking about voting to not raise taxes on the upper 1%. And now they throw all this baggage in on a bill that should be about the payroll tax cut to muddy the waters. It's a pox on both of their houses. We need to vote all these bums out. This is not our country anymore.
Is the pipeline an issue for you?
Let it stand on its own merit. I don't know what the issue is, but to throw that in as if it's such a priority when we were debating taxes, where we had to have a tax of when the Bush tax cuts came in, any other ancillary issue was not allowed because it was so important to businesses and not raising taxes and stifling our economy. But when it comes to the middle class tax cut, we throw all these other issues in about a pipeline. Let the pipeline debate on its own.
Thanks.
Right now, taxes are going to go up for poor people.
Thanks, Leroy. We'll try to squeeze in one more call. Harold, Republican line in New Kent, Virginia.
Hi, this is Harold Johnson. I'm a Republican, but I'll tell you right now, first of all, I'm proud to be an American, but I have never in my life seen that you can have a catastrophe around the world. Japan can blow up, and we can send money over there and bail everybody out.
On this
We'll stop you there, Harold. Thanks for your call.
The nays are 193, and the motion is opted. Without objection, a motion to reconsider is laid upon the table. House will come to order. House will come to order. House will come to order. What purpose does the gentleman from Maryland rise?
Mr. Speaker, I have a motion to instruct at the desk.
Clerk will designate the motion.
Motion to instruct conferees offered by Mr. Hoyer of Maryland.
Pursuant to House Resolution 502, the motion is considered read. Pursuant to Clause 7 of Rule 22, the gentleman from Maryland, Mr. Hoyer, and the gentleman from Michigan, Mr. Camp, will each control 30 minutes. The chair now recognizes the gentleman from Maryland.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Speaker, the House is not in order.
Gentleman is correct. Gentleman from Maryland is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, it is December 20th. I yield myself 4 minutes.
Gentleman's recognized.
Mr. Speaker, it is December 20th, and the Republicans are using it as a day to dissemble, pretending to support a tax cut for working Americans while making it uncertain and delayed. We, of course, as we all know, could pass the Senate bill by 2 o'clock today, send it to the President, and provide certainty to working Americans come January 1st that their taxes will not go up. The choice I suggest to all of you is not between 60 days and 1 year, because at least we all say we're for 1 year. We are for 1 year. We will support a 1-year extension. But we know the Senate has been unable to agree. And so they sent us back an agreement that they could agree on, to give us 60 days to get to that 1 year. Instead, House Republicans refused to even bring the Senate's bipartisan compromise to the floor. 89 U.S. senators voted for a compromise, and you will not bring it to the floor. And you create uncertainty and anxiety among the public. That is shameful and disappointing. As a result, on January 1st, if there is no agreement, those of you who vote to send this to conference today and against this motion to instruct will be responsible for 160 million Americans seeing their taxes increase next year, for 2.3 million people seeking jobs who will lose their unemployment lifeline by mid-February, and for 48 million Americans having their access to doctors placed in jeopardy. Those are the stakes. America thought we had an agreement this weekend. John McCain thought we had an agreement this Saturday. And yes, Speaker Boehner thought we had an agreement on Saturday. America thought there was reason to hope that middle-class Americans would be spared this entirely preventable tax increase. I tell you, my friends, if this were about the upper income tax increase, it would pass like lightning in your conference. Like lightning. But no, this is about putting in jeopardy a middle-class tax cut. And we can play political games with that. We're now witnessing the concluding convulsion of confrontation and obstruction in this most unproductive, Tea Party-dominated partisan session of Congress. As a result, Speaker Boehner decided he wasn't for the agreement. Now, Speaker Boehner, some months ago, said this, because there's a lot of talk about this one-year extension. Let me tell you what Speaker Boehner said 6 months ago. He called proposals to extend or expand the payroll tax cut at that point by a year, quote, another little short-term gimmick. Same rhetoric, different circumstances. But both put at risk the middle class. In Senate Republican leader McConnell's own words, The compromise that you are rejecting today was designed to pass. I ask for yield myself an additional minute. In fact, the bill that you passed, and you knew it, was designed to fail. And because you knew it was going to fail, your Republican leadership in the Senate objected to it being considered on the floor of the United States Senate, just as you have refused to consider the Senate's compromise on this floor. It did so in the Senate, that bill that was designed to pass, according to Senator McConnell, it did so in the Senate with an overwhelming support from 83% of Republicans and almost every Democrat, including the entire Senate Republican leadership and the entire Democratic leadership. Democrats, Mr. Speaker, are fighting to prevent a painful tax increase for the middle class. The way to do that is to pass the Senate compromise while we continue to work on a year-long extension. That's what Senator Reid said he'll do, Mr. Speaker. That's what we're prepared to do, Mr. Speaker. But we don't want to put at risk January 1 coming and that tax cut disappearing. If they fail to pass the compromise, House Republicans will have to answer to the American people whose taxes will go up. One additional minute. To the innocent, unemployed, and Medicare seniors seeking services from their doctors. We must not leave this work unfinished just days before the holidays and New Year. That's what the Senate did. They gave us time. They gave the American people time. Instead, we ought to be bringing relief to middle-class families that are increasingly anxious about their future during what should be a joyful and hopeful holiday season. We ought to pass the bipartisan Senate bill. That's what this motion to instruct says. That is what the American people want to happen in Washington, to see us work together, come to agreement, act, bring certainty, stop the blame game. We can send the bipartisan agreement to the President today, and he will sign it. Vote yes on this motion to instruct. Vote for the American workers, the Medicare recipient, and the unemployed. Vote for this motion to instruct, and I yield back the balance of my time. And, Mr. Speaker, I ask unanimous consent to yield for the purposes of balancing the remainder of the time to my good friend from New York, Joe Crowley, a member of the Ways and Means Committee.